Hey everyone, this is the True Crimes of the Empire podcast. We've got weekly episodes about real, current, and historic crimes of the most brutal and murderous empires. We've got a Patreon for just $7 a month, featuring longer episodes and bonus live streams, or you can find the shorter episodes for free on any podcast app, or Spotify, and also on YouTube.
Nice.
We also have other social medias I should mention. We have TikTok, we have Twitter. I'm obviously on Instagram. I'm TurnLeftist3 if you guys want to plug either of your social medias.
Who the fuck am I? I'm Joseph Ryan Banks. My full name. My full government name. You can find me with that. And then we've got Commo Mate, right?
Yeah, Jared is Commo Mate.
That's me. Fuck yeah. Hello. Follow my Instagram, Commo Mate, or don't. It's up to you.
That's
you
the
have free
Australian
will.
one. Commo _M8.
Yeah, that one.
If you liked the Turn Leftist podcast, you're going to like this even more. I'm putting in more effort this time, I promise.
It's evolved.
I got better at audio editing.
There you go.
Did you guys like my, probably by far one of my most popular memes that I've made? Aside from the CIA discovers Chinese plot to sit back and watch collapse of the United States. The other day when I made that set of the frazzled-looking Wojak American versus the calm-looking Chinese guy saying, bro, just fix your country. Because the Wojak American has like a compound, an off-grid homestead, livestock, canned food, weapons. Like,
Yeah,
Chinese guy's
I
like,
thought
dude,
that was...
it's not that necessary. Like, what are you doing?
All you need is to organize with your friends and family in your community. You don't need to create a personal army.
All those things are what a country is for, bro. How about a functional society? Have you ever thought of that? Like,
yeah, exactly. I was going to say one thing about the revolution happening here and getting educated by China. I saw one post and it was very interesting. It was a translation from someone speaking about it in Chinese, and then it was translated English. And they said, an egg that is cracked from the outside becomes a dish. An egg that is cracked from the inside becomes new life.
yeah,
So I thought that was a really
so good, dude.
brilliant, good metaphor.
I love that. Like, that's another thing that they have in a lot of Eastern cultures that we just do not seem to have here. Like, there's some Americanisms, but they're not like that. Like, that one's a great one.
Yeah, we're fucking banging rocks together over here.
Capitalism can never stay home. It goes abroad. The ordinary people simply paid the cost of empire.
We have now explained the various forces at work that led to the end of the apartheid system. Not just the diplomatic pressure, but the very real militant force that was applied, and the many lives lost in the process. We discussed the protests, strikes, and armed struggle led by the African National Congress and other anti-apartheid organizations such as the Pan-Africanist Congress, and of course, Umkhonto Wesiwe. And don't forget the mass revolts, such as the Soweto Uprising in 1976, led mostly by students, as well as the Township Revolt. And of course, there was the international pressure, the various economic sanctions, cultural boycotts, and diplomatic pressure from international government bodies like the United Nations, and the divestment movement, particularly in the United States and Europe, which pressured companies to withdraw investments from South Africa. These sanctions and boycotts severely impacted South Africa's economy, making it increasingly difficult for the apartheid regime to sustain itself. In the end, the cost of maintaining apartheid, including military and police operations, became unsustainable. The oppressed people also became literally ungovernable. So these are all just things to think about when you want to think about what the end of an oppressive system actually looks like, how it overturns, how you make that happen, and the level of force required to do that, the level of mass uprising you need.
And I guess boycotts do work.
Well, you can say that, but you could also just say boycotts in conjunction with a mass militant movement, uprisings over the course of decades, and structured vanguardist lines.
Yeah. I suppose that's the main thing is they weren't just doing a boycott, and they also, the apartheid regime wasn't getting weekly shipments of arms and billions of dollars from the USA like Israel gets. So I guess there's that. The USA is powerful enough that it can just counteract boycotts, I guess, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, South Africa and the apartheid regime did not have that level of support at the time. But I made a handy little list here of notable things that did not end apartheid. Individualist acts of violence or assassinations, even of wealthy or powerful people. others who were fans of adventurism commenting that assassin's name online every time there's another example of oppression mentioned. This is just my own little pet peeve. The amount of people online who are just commenting Luigi under every article, under every Instagram post of a new bad thing that is happening. There's a lot of bad things happening. We're a month into the Trump administration. It's new bad things happening every day. And people's response to bad thing is comment Luigi. And I'm telling you, it's not helping. I'm here to tell you that will not help one bit. It's annoying to me.
They didn't have social media back then, but if they did, people would probably be posting the same annoying shit.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure during the struggle to end apartheid, there were people who were chanting slogans, who were doing their version of posting things, probably spray painting, graffiti, like any kind of public notice that you support X or Y movement that is against apartheid. It's cool. It's great. You know, visibility is cool. Creating awareness is nice, but just realize that's what it is. But it's not stopping anyone. It's not scaring any of the people. And especially now in the age of social media, I think that's the difference. Like, I'm driving around my town today and I saw someone had sprayed "Deny, Defend, Depose" on the garage door of a seemingly abandoned structure on the side of this. It is on the kind of the side of the highway. That's something. That's public. People will see that. If you are posting hot memes that are anti-capitalist in your own social media sphere, that is only getting seen by people who are already subscribed to that. That is not getting shown to people who have not made an explicit interest in their social media algorithm in that. And I want people to understand that more and more. Like, we are getting increasingly walled off, and social media is becoming more of a pacifier rather than an amplifier for your message. Like, am I going crazy, or have you noticed that it is increasingly echo chambered and walled off, and now anything you say is getting just sent to people who already think like you, and it is not getting sent as like a public loudspeaker, right?
I think it's mostly, that's just the nature of social media, and it's designed that way. And you've got to remember who's in charge of social media is capitalists who are not trying to, the last thing they fucking want is for their platforms to foment any kind of mass fucking anything. You know what I mean?
What is the internet outside of social media? Like, what other internet is there other than social media now?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, like, they don't want to foment anything. So, like, what are their algorithms going to be designed to do? They're going to be designed to funnel people into echo chambers, and you will get no reach outside of that, basically. And that's more or less what it does.
The last thing I'll say before I get back into the notes on the commenting Luigi online does not help tangent is that recently I saw the video. They're talking about this app. It was like the third most popular app in the App Store, and it's like Protect or something. It's like Uber with guns, and that's how they advertise it. It's for rich people to hire armed guards on demand, and all the people who will come and guard you are ex-military, ex-police. They all have the certifications. They are heavily armed, and they will protect you anywhere you need to go. This has been the response. Like, when you are commenting Luigi online, when you are expressing that you are a fan of CEOs being held accountable, they have not changed their policy. They have not made healthcare any cheaper. They have not changed anything about the business structure or the industry of robbing you while you die, preventing you from accessing healthcare for profit. They have not changed any of that. They are hiring armed guards. That was always going to be the response because it is not a collective movement that we have. But anyway, getting back into the notes.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, there were political reforms and negotiations. For example, in the late 1980s, then President F.W. de Klerk began dismantling apartheid laws, recognizing the need for change. This was only the result of increasing pressure. In 1990, he lifted the ban on the ANC and other anti-apartheid organizations and released Nelson Mandela after 27 years in prison. Negotiations between the apartheid government and the ANC, led by Mandela, resulted in the 1994 democratic elections, in which all races could vote for the first time. So we are not at all discounting the democratic and peaceful processes, merely stressing this was a struggle that took place on all fronts. The 1994 elections resulted in a landslide victory for the ANC, and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. A new constitution was adopted in 1996, enshrining equality, human rights, and the rule of law, formally ending apartheid. And the word formally does a lot of work here because there is a legacy of racial segregation and inequality that lasts still today, and is currently a hot topic as the government attempts to correct this with land reform, and Boer farmers are seeking refugee status from Trump and Elon Musk, who are of course sympathetic. I do find it funny how much of the things that we are talking about become relevant in just everyday media. Now that we have an infamous, I think it's fair to say, South African pretty much running our government at this point, Elon Musk is becoming more and more relevant with time, and people are seeing why white South Africans are despicable, horrible people.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever met a white South African that I've liked. Like, no offense.
I mean, they have the song for a reason, right?
I've never met a nice South African. No, he's never met a nice South African. bloody surprising then, 'cause we're a bunch of ignorant loudmouth with no sense of humour.
I remember I shot a wedding for a white South African couple, and they were actually quite nice, but even nice people who are colonizers or come from colonizer backgrounds, they say funny things that they don't even realize. It's crazy. At the wedding, they had a thing for everyone to sign that was like, it was a picture of Africa, and at the top of the whole continent, and at the top it said "Our home, Africa," and then people would sign it and put messages in it. And I took one look at that, and I was like, "Your home? Like, what? How about you put a picture of Europe there, bro?"
You don't
like,
feel weird saying that? Like,
yeah, I was like, I personally would feel really strange if I put a picture of like Australia up and said it was like, "This is my native land" or some shit like that, which is what they're basically saying. And they say "our home, Africa," and it's like it's not. Sorry, like it's not.
I mean, although it's no weirder than like anyone in America doing that same thing. It's like it is still colonized land. Like people just are so used to not thinking of the U.S. as Native American land that they don't think of anyone else saying that they are native to the U.S. as being weird saying that. Anyway, I want to get back to the dissolution of apartheid. Yeah, so obviously Trump and Elon Musk are sympathetic to the Boer farmers and the attempts at land reform.
Shocking.
Yeah, not surprising whatsoever. But I would like to talk more about the legacy in just a bit. For now, I want to talk more about the new government and the changes made when apartheid ended. Interestingly, several individuals who had been labeled as criminals or terrorists by the apartheid regime became key members of South Africa's new government. This transition reflected the recognition of their roles as freedom fighters in the struggle against apartheid. And we have some notable examples. Of course, Nelson Mandela. He was imprisoned for 27 years from 1962 to 1990 for his involvement in the ANC's armed struggle against apartheid. Labeled a terrorist by the South African government and Western countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, and now he was president. After his release, Mandela became the first president of post-apartheid South Africa in '94, serving as a symbol of reconciliation and unity. We have Walter Sisulu, close ally of Mandela. Sisulu was also imprisoned for his role in the anti-apartheid struggle. He was a key leader of the ANC and was sentenced to life imprisonment during the Rivonia trial in 1964. After his release in 1989, Sisulu played a significant role in the negotiations to end apartheid and became a respected elder statesman in the new government. We have Govan Mbeki. Mbeki was a senior ANC leader and a defendant in the Rivonia trial. He was also imprisoned for 24 years, 1963 to 87, for his involvement in the armed struggle. After his release, he served as a deputy president of the Senate in the new democratic government. Ahmed Kathrada. Kathrada was another Rivonia trial defendant and spent 26 years in prison for his anti-apartheid activities. After his release, he served as a parliamentary counselor to Mandela and later as a member of parliament. And Joe Slovo. Joe Slovo was a leader of the South African Communist Party, SACP, and a key figure in the ANC's armed wing, Mkhonto we Sizwe. We've obviously mentioned Joe Slovo a bunch of times. He was labeled a terrorist by the apartheid regime as well. And after apartheid ended, Slovo served as Minister of Housing in Mandela's government, playing a crucial role in addressing housing shortages. And our friend Chris Hani. Hani was the leader of the SACP and a prominent figure in MK. He was assassinated in 1993, just before the first democratic elections, but he was widely regarded as a hero of the struggle. His death galvanized support for the ANC and highlighted the urgency of the transition to democracy. Thabo Mbeki, the son of Govan Mbeki, was active in the ANC's external mission and was involved in mobilizing international support against apartheid. He was often labeled a terrorist by the apartheid regime. He served as deputy president under Mandela and later as president of South Africa from 1999 to 2008. And Jacob Zuma. Zuma was a member of MK and spent 10 years in prison on Robben Island for his anti-apartheid activities. After apartheid, he held various government positions, including deputy president and later president of South Africa from 2009 to 2018. These individuals, once vilified by the apartheid regime, were celebrated as heroes in the new democratic South Africa. Their inclusion in the government symbolized the triumph of justice and the rejection of apartheid's oppressive policies. However, their legacies remain complex, with some later facing criticism for their actions or policies while in office, usually from liberals. But yeah, that's all just to say that, I think I've belabored this point. I think I've said it too many times. Like, your terrorists become recognized freedom fighters. They become legitimate politicians and leaders of the new government when your struggle wins, when your struggle is actually victorious and you are able to overturn an oppressive system.
Yep. Terrorism has always been a nebulous concept. It more or less just means whoever the US likes and doesn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or in any context, any activity that uses violence that goes against their monopoly on violence. as labeled terrorism, no matter how legitimate it may be.
Exactly. Yep. It's a more or less a very, very useless term, especially now in the 21st century.
I mean, it's not useless. It's just that
I just mean in the context of US hegemony, it's a useless term because when people say terrorist, they mean country that the USA designates as a terrorist, basically.
Yeah. It's just frustrating when the facts are that a group like Hamas is abiding by international law, and then groups like Israel and the US are not, and then dupes still call one terrorist and the other one international order.
Yep.
But anyway, the end of apartheid marked a significant turning point in South Africa's history, transitioning the country to a non-racial democracy. However, the legacy of apartheid continues to affect South African society, particularly in terms of economic inequality and social divisions. And this is from a CNN article written 8 days ago as of this recording. This is talking about the South Africa land freeze that Trump is so opposed to. For instance, the 1913 Natives Land Act limited black ownership to just 7% of the land, later revised to 13%. Now, more than 100 years later, black people make up 81% of South Africa's population of 63 million, yet only own 4% of private land, according to a government land audit conducted in 2017. So that is an incredible disparity. To make up 81% of the population and own only 4% of private land.
It just goes to show that there's no actual liberation without economic liberation.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. Obviously, the end of apartheid was a massive liberation. I don't want to downplay that, but you need to have economic liberation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, you maintain the same oppressive structures in the form of wealth inequality.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns all the land in South Africa? Who are the richest people? It's still white people.
Yeah. The government's land redistribution and restitution programs have been criticized for inefficiency, corruption, and lack of funding. The debate over expropriation of land without compensation remains contentious, with concerns about its impact on food security and investment. So I could see why you would have some legitimate concerns. If you disrupt the existing farming industry, you could possibly create some issues with food insecurity.
That's happened before.
Yeah. But it seems like the only people who would possibly object to, you would have to be so audacious to object to having land expropriated from people who have held it for generations. It's like you have generated enough wealth. You've stolen enough wealth from that land. You don't need to get more by being paid to take it from you.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, I think you've extracted enough value from that land. And also none of that land was never yours in the fucking first place. So, what are we even talking about?
But speaking of generational wealth, South Africa has one of the highest levels of income inequality globally, with a Gini coefficient of around 0.63, where 0 represents perfect equality and 1 represents perfect inequality. So that's pretty bad. The wealthiest 10% of the population owns more than 85% of the country's wealth, while the bottom 60% owns less than 7%. Racial disparities persist, with the majority of wealth still concentrated in the hands of the white minority, who make up about 7% of the population. Unemployment is extremely high, at around 32% as of 2023, with youth unemployment exceeding 60%. Poverty disproportionately affects Black South Africans, with over 55% of the population living below the national poverty line. And of course, there are disparities in access to and quality of education. The apartheid education system was deliberately designed to disadvantage Black South Africans, and its effects persist. Schools in predominantly Black areas are often underfunded, overcrowded, and lack basic infrastructure, while historically white schools remain well-resourced. The matric pass rate, or high school graduation, is often used as a measure of success, but critics argue that it masks low-quality education and high dropout rates, particularly in rural areas. For higher education, access remains unequal, with Black students facing financial barriers and limited spaces at universities. Protests such as the #FeesMustFall movement in 2015 to 2016 highlighted the struggles of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I have a little side note on this. It was a student-led protest movement that began in South Africa in October 2015 in response to proposed increases in university tuition fees, which students argued would make higher education even more inaccessible, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. The movement quickly grew into a broader campaign addressing systemic issues in South Africa's education system, including inequality, underfunding, and the legacy of apartheid. The protests began at the University of Witwatersrand, or WITS, in Johannesburg after the government announced a 10 to 12% fee increase for 2016. Students argued that the increases would exclude poor and working-class students, perpetuating racial and economic inequality. The immediate demand was for a freeze on tuition fee increases. Broader demands included free decolonized education, increased government funding for universities, and an end to the outsourcing of university workers. for example, cleaners and security guards. The movement quickly spread to other universities across South Africa, including the University of Cape Town, UCT, Stellenbosch University, and Rhodes University. Again, all these names sounding very familiar as hotbeds of political unrest from before. Protests involved marches, sit-ins, and clashes with police, leading to arrests and injuries. In October 2015, then-President Jacob Zuma announced a 0% fee increase for 2016, temporarily calming the protests. However, the movement reignited in 2016 as students pushed for more comprehensive reforms, including free education. So they won, but then they still pushed for more. So take note.
Damn.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's sick.
So in December 2017, the government announced that it would provide fully subsidized higher education for students from households earning less than 350,000 rands per year. So it's means tested, but they almost got free college. And of course, despite this, challenges remain, including underfunding, overcrowding, and debates over the decolonization of curriculum. But back to the legacy of apartheid. So the healthcare system is also highly unequal, with a two-tier system. A well-resourced private sector serving the wealthy, mostly white and middle-class black South Africans, and an underfunded public sector serving the majority, mostly poor black South Africans. The public system is overburdened with shortages of staff, equipment, and medicines. South Africa has one of the highest HIV/AIDS prevalence in the world, with 7.8 million people living with HIV as of 2023. Life expectancy and infant mortality rates have improved since apartheid, but disparities remain, particularly between urban and rural areas. The economy remains dominated by industries, such as mining and finance, that were historically controlled by white-owned corporations. Black Economic Empowerment, or BEE policies, have sought to address this, but critics argue that they have primarily benefited a small black elite rather than the broader population. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
just a little bit familiar. God.
It's the same thing everywhere around the world, man.
Yeah, I don't know. History rhymes, you know?
And I'm sure they have their own anti-BEE movement that's composed of a bunch of white racists.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And they're fucking fascist white South African farmers, which white South African farmers are like this big fascist signifier in Western countries as well. Australia we love our white South African farmers. We always
get off on like telling all the racists who are raging about that, like, oh, they should just obey the law. What's wrong?
Yeah.
Just obey the law. What's the problem?
It's pretty funny.
So there's also spatial inequality. Apartheid's spatial planning, which segregated communities by race, continues to affect access to jobs, services, and infrastructure. Many black South Africans still live in townships and informal settlements far from economic opportunities. So this is all to emphasize that even when you have a very militant and committed movement, and one that actually wins, you still have an immense amount of work to do reversing the structures and effects of that oppression. Not to put a damper on the end of apartheid and the very real accomplishments, again, just to make sure everyone understands that you have to have realistic, sober expectations about what this kind of change looks like, and what your role in it would have to be before, during, and after. That's the point of this whole show, really.
Absolutely.
The economic legacy of apartheid is deeply entrenched, and while South Africa has made significant strides in building a democratic society, inequality remains a defining feature of its economy. Addressing these disparities requires sustained efforts in land reform, education, healthcare, and economic transformation. However, progress has been hindered by corruption, inefficiency, and the sheer scale of the challenges inherited from apartheid. And this is the conclusion from the MK statement that we read from the last two episodes. In the course of war, life is lost. The challenge before us was to avoid indiscriminate killing of civilians, which MK certainly had the capacity to carry out. Although it is possible that entirely accurate statistics will never be known beyond any doubt, it is evident that MK acted with great restraint. This record should be compared with the many thousands of deaths of civilians at the hands of successive apartheid regimes, with this continuing right until April 1994, in countless massacres, assassinations, and executions. In addition, there have been millions of civilian casualties, bloodshed of Holocaust proportions, in wars waged by surrogate forces in neighboring states. We also register our deep regret for the deaths of innocent civilians killed in the course of the struggle for justice and freedom. We extend our condolences to the families of all those who were killed or injured, including the soldiers and police who fought against us. The taking of life is not an easy thing. To us, all life is sacred, and we have never been callous in our struggle. So for me, that's the end of the apartheid series. That's all I have written. Was any moment that stuck out to you in particular, now that we've done 8 full episodes and this is our wrap-up episode? Anything that you want to say just to wrap it up, or anything that you remember in particular?
The main takeaway is how just the effectiveness of sort of Marxist-Leninist vanguardism, even in the context of political parties and groups that aren't actually Marxist-Leninists. Like, obviously, Mandela was very much influenced by communist movements, and he read a lot of Mao and Marx and Lenin. Obviously, he wasn't a communist, but he basically used communist tactics and won. Yeah, that's my main.
I would say that's actually a big problem that we face in the West, is that our enemies have also read Marx and Lenin and Mao, and they've taken some of the tactics. Like, you could definitely make the case that what happens in the U.S., and I'm sure you could say that, like, your NSN is sort of a vanguard party for the fascist right. They have like a militant movement. They're trying to actually go and influence politics with their violence and their threats. And a lot of times these militia movements are successful, unfortunately, and they're doing things we would not like them to do, but that's because there is a vacuum. There is no such militant movement on the left that has a countervailing force, right?
100%. That's what you face, is if you don't have a... So we have the issue as Marxist-Leninists is we actually need to educate people, because the default position in the West is a sort of a fascist disposition. Or a liberal fascist sort of disposition, whereas in other places that's just not the case. So we have to be educating and agitating. Otherwise, you will have groups like the NSN and other groups just come in, and they will be the ones who run things, not us.
I also think a big part of it is liberals and people on the left are still under this delusion that moral superiority equals more effectiveness, or that simply being the correct one or having like the facts on your side means that more people are going to join you. But in reality, what people want is someone effective. They want some actual change. And so if you present them with the left that offers them Hunger Games style fantasies about what a revolution is going to look like and what their part in it will be, and then the right offers them very realistic, on the ground things that they can do right here and now to affect change in their community, even if that change is horrible, it hurts the people that they want to hurt, and their enemies feel the effects of it. Well, a lot of people are going to choose that because they want something realistic they can do here and now, and they don't want the fantasies. They don't want a movie promise.
Exactly. You need to have a platform and an alternative to offer. Otherwise, people will default to whatever the most popular ideology is.
Yeah.
If you live in the West, it's liberalism, which, as we know, liberalism gives way to fascism. So, Nelson Mandela, he actually offered an alternative, and he worked on the ground and built that. And that's all it took.
Yeah. I think my takeaway, not my takeaway, but like one of the things I think back on from doing the series was Doman. I remember that guy a lot. The guy who was a translator, and then they took him to the Dutch colonies in Indonesia to help him just do work there and just translate for them. And then he learned from the native Indonesian people how to actually fight the Dutch. And then he brought that knowledge back, and he was duping the Dutch people and said, actually, I can't even empathize with my native people anymore. I don't even like those guys. I don't fuck with them anymore. I like the Dutch people so much better. You guys are cooler. I don't even think I want to go back to South Africa. And then as soon as he gets back, he starts an armed revolt. Great guy. I love that.
That's sick.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. This is a fun series, and soon we'll start on the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's our next series. So join us for that.
Oh, amazing. Looking forward to it.
Can't wait. Well, thanks everyone again for listening, and we'll see you for season 2, starting up next week.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. I'll see you in the Discord.
Yeah, I'll see you later, bro.
Later.
My fellow South Africans, I feel it is time for me to tell you the facts as they really are. What? Bananas are marsupials. 2. Cars run on gravy. 3. Salmon live in trees and eat pencils. 4. Reform in South Africa is on the way.
I've travelled this whole world of ours from Barnsley to Peru. I've had sunstroke in the Arctic and a swim in Timbuktu. I've seen unicorns in Burma and a yeti in Nepal. And I've danced with 10-foot pygmies in a Montezuma hall. I've met the King of China and the working Yorkshire miner, but I've never met a nice South African.
Now he's never met a nice South African. And it's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of arrogant bastards who hate black people.
I once got served in Woolies after less than 4 weeks' wait. I had lunch with Rowan Atkinson when he paid and wasn't late. I know a public swimming bath where they don't piss in the pool. I know a guy who got a job straight after leaving school. I met a normal Merman and a fairly modest German, but I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And that's it's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of talentless murderers who smell like baboons.
I've had a close encounter of the 22nd kind. That's when an alien spaceship disappears up your behind. I've got directory inquiries after less than 40 rings. I've even heard a decent song by Paul McCartney's Wings. I've seen a flying pig in a quite convincing wig, but I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And it's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of ignorant love-nuts with no sense of humour.
I've met the Loch Ness Monster and he looks like Fred Astaire. At the BBC in London, he's the chief commissioner. I know a place in Glasgow which is bright with daffodillies. I met the man in Kathmandu who claimed to have 2 willies. I've had a nice pot noodle, but I've never had a poodle. And I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And it's not bloody surprising, man, because we've never met one either.
Except Brighton back, and he's emigrated to Paris.
Yes, he's got a nice South African, and he's hardly ever killed anyone. And he's not smelly at all, that's why they put him in.